Let's establish one fact.
Is it dangerous inside a men's shelter?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Widely accepted among homeless men living in New York City, including Raul Silva, a native of the Parkchester section of the Bronx.
A lot of fights, a lot of arguments, people getting hurt.
Here's another fact. In spite of Mayor Bill de Blasio's assurances that his master plan to address homelessness in New York City would actually turn the tide on the crisis, the reality is,
what are we fighting for? I have 3 kids.
The results have been mixed.
Over the last few years, we've attended countless tension-filled community meetings where residents have routinely accused the de Blasio administration of leaving them out of the decision-making process over what type of shelter would come into their community and where. City Homeless Services officials readily admit that process starts with a shelter provider choosing a proposed location with no immediate input from the community. The question we're asking is why?
This story is about residents who acknowledge the homelessness in their communities and do not object to an incoming shelter.
It's a security question that should be raised.
For the last several months, we've been investigating, digging, and following a paper trail that exposes just how the de Blasio administration's shelter selection process begins. Quote, regarding site selection, not-for-profit providers propose new shelters to DHS through our open-ended RFP process, an agency spokesperson tells Pix 11. In the Parkchester section of the Bronx, where the city is planning to open a men's-only shelter on Westchester Avenue, we do not know exactly when that process began. But follow this timeline. We dug up a Department of Buildings application from November 2018, which shows the de Blasio administration at that time became aware of a Brooklyn-based architecture company's intentions to change the number of dwelling units and change the type of occupancy or use, and change the building's occupancy classification from commercial buildings to residential, hotels, and dormitories. In short, the descriptions on this November 2018 form sound a lot like a homeless shelter. A shelter that would be surrounded by several existing schools, a library, and an adult daycare center. But City Homeless Services officials recently confirmed to Pix 11 the agency took another 3.5 months to begin telling the residents of Parkchester. Quote, we provided notice to the community, including community boards and elected officials, on February 22, 2019. We sat down with Bronx native William Rivera, district manager for Community Board 9, which covers the proposed Parkchester shelter site.
When did you first become aware of the plans for this shelter?
February 22nd, 2019. Even though it might be a legally binding location as of right, like you said, or it might be something they can do in this location, I don't think it's a smart location. I don't think it's a great location for this type of shelter.
But guess how long it took Rivera to relay news of the incoming shelter to his residents?
According to your records, it took another 8 weeks, actually 8 weeks and 3 days, for CB9 to hold its first open community notification meeting. Is that true?
Yeah, April 12th, yeah.
That seems like a long time.
Yeah.
The de Blasio administration's shelter application and notification process that left residents out of the loop in the Bronx is not unique. Councilman Paul Vallone represents frustrated residents in College Point, Queens.
When you deal with the community last and the problem last, it's never going to be finished. It's never going to be dealt with correctly.
Councilman Raidanis Rodriguez represents Washington Heights.
I feel that this is part of the process that we had to change.
Here's Staten Island Councilman Joe Borelli.
When you have the jam it down your throat mentality of Bill de Blasio, this is what's going to happen every now and then.
The universal theme in all of these interviews, a plea for the de Blasio administration to give communities more input in exactly where a shelter should go in their neighborhood. City Public Advocate Jomani Williams.
If you engage with communities, it takes a little longer, but you can find ways to work with people for things that we all know we need.
We reached out repeatedly to the city's Department of Social Services, which oversees the Department of Homeless Services, for an opportunity to sit down with Mayor de Blasio's point person on the homeless crisis, Commissioner Stephen Banks, and hoped to ask him directly what's stopping the administration from allowing communities to enter the decision-making process sooner. We also submitted several Freedom of Information requests, hoping to learn more on how the shelter selection process evolved in the Bronx. Agency officials failed to provide any interview opportunities with Commissioner Banks in time for this report, and we were recently informed our records request has been delayed again until at least late September. We'll be following up. Jay Dow, Pix 11 News.